Hello friends, the second lecture for this week is Ruskin Bond's short story The Boy Who Broke the Bank. We will see the objectives, the life and writings of Ruskin Bond, read a few selected passages from the short story The Boy Who Broke the Bank, look at the characters, we will see the theme, form, language and literary aspects of the story, then discuss some elements of human relationships and reflections on life, consider a few takeaways and then finally summarize our presentation. Let's see the objectives now. The first objective is to highlight the life and writings of Ruskin Bond. The second objective is to discuss Bond's humorous but serious short story The Boy Who Broke the Bank. The third objective is to examine and explain how a rumor generates and spreads like a wildfire. The fourth objective is to understand the role of effective listening in our everyday life. If we don't listen well, then we have to face the consequences. That's the whole story about. The last objective is to address people's problems at the right time to avoid catastrophic consequences. If you don't listen at the right time, then we have to face the music. Let's see Ruskin Bond's life now. Ruskin Bond is a living author in India. He was born in 1934. He is a most loved children's writer in India. He is a novelist, a short story writer, a journalist and an essayist as well. He has received some notable awards like Padma Shri and Padma Bhushan. He also received the Delhi government's Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012. It's amazing to see that Ruskin Bond has had an exceptional writing career over 70 years. We have a quotation from Ruskin Bond. To be able to laugh and to be merciful are the only things that make man better than the beast. As you can see, most writers believe that we are human beings, we can be better than animals. And to be better than animals, we have to laugh at ourselves and we have to be kind to human beings, fellow beings. Here are the titles of some of the writings of Ruskin Bond. For novels we have two examples, The Room on the Roof and A Flight of Pigeons. For children's novels we have two examples, Angry River and The Blue Umbrella. For short story collections we have two titles, The Night Train at Deoli. From this title only we have taken our short story The Boy Who Broke the Bank, and the second short story collection that we have mentioned here is Our Trees Still Grow in Delhi. Ruskin Bond also has written some autobiographies. One of the examples that we have is Scenes from a Writer's Life, published in 1998. Ruskin Bond through his writing has lived a very rich life. Anyone who reads his stories would love to read more and more of Ruskin Bond. The Boy Who Broke the Bank is a short story that we are considering in this presentation. This is a well-known and frequently anthologized short story. It was included in the volume The Night Train at Deoli and Other Stories, published in 1988. This is concerned with a sweeper boy who unwittingly becomes a cause for the collapse of the Paipal Bank. I have also included this short story in my book English and Soft Skills Volume 1 to highlight the communication skill of listening. If we listen well, we can live our life well. That is the whole idea of this story. We have a list of characters who appear in this story. As we read the selected passages from the story, you can understand how many characters interact with each other. So let's read the list of characters that we have in the story. Nathu is a sweeper boy. He is the boy who breaks the bank. Sitaram is the friend of Nathu and a washerman's son. We have two friends, Mrs. Srivastava and Mrs. Bhushan. They interact with each other. They talk about the bank not paying salary to Nathu, and that's how the rumor of the bank not having enough money spreads like wildfire. Mr. Bhushan visits Kamal Kishore's photography shop and where Mrs. Bhushan and talks about the bank not having enough balance. Kamal Kishore is a photographer and he shares this information with Deep Chand. Deep Chand is a barber and this information is shared with the half shaven old man who is a customer at Deep Chand's shop, and this is overheard by many others including Ganpat, a beggar, and this beggar also has saved some money, about 1000 rupees. On hearing this, the bank does not have enough money. Ganpat, who was never seen to walk, is running at the top speed to collect his money back from the bank. Seth Govindram is the owner of the Pipal Nagar bank, but he is not available for responding to the people. So people understand that the bank owner has escaped. All these problems arise because of one character, the manager of the bank. This manager does not listen to Nathu. That is why we have highlighted Nathu and also the manager. If the manager had listened to Nathu, that is, Nathu goes to the manager almost every day, asks him, give me my monthly salary, but the manager does not listen to him, he ignores him. Even after the 20th of that particular month, Nathu does not get his payment, and that is why he shares this sad news that he is not getting his pay regularly from the bank, and Sitaram hears it. He shares it with Srivatsava. Srivatsava tells Mrs. Bhushan. Bhushan tells Kamal Kishore. Kishore tells Dipchan. Dipchan and Kishore talking with each other is heard by the old man, and then it spreads to all people in the town of Pipal Nagar. And so at the end we find that all people go there to ask for money, the manager does not have money to distribute, and then people believe that the bank does not have any money and they break the bank. Let us see the opening of the story now. Nathu grumbled to himself as he swept the steps of the Pipal Nagar bank owned by Seth Govindram. He used the small broom hurriedly and carelessly, and the dust, after rising in a cloud above his head, settled down again on the steps. As Nathu was banging his pan against a dustbin, Sitaram, the washerman's son, passed by. Sitaram was on his delivery round. He had a bundle of freshly pressed clothes balanced on his head. Don't raise such dust, he called out to Nathu. Are you annoyed because they are still refusing to pay you an extra 2 rupees a month? Sitaram is talking about extra 2 rupees, but Nathu is worried about the regular salary that he wants to get. I don't want to talk about it, complained the sweeper boy. I haven't even received my regular pay, and this is the 20th of the month. And this is the news, and this spreads to the level of saying that the bank is broken. We have two friends, Mrs. Srivastava and Mrs. Bhushan. Mrs. Srivastava had to do some shopping. She gave instruction to the ayah about looking after the baby and told the cook not to be late with the midday meal. Then she set out for the Pipal Nagar marketplace to make her customary tour of the cloth shops. A large shady tamarind tree grew at one end of the bazaar, and it was here that Mrs. Srivastava found her friend Mrs. Bhushan sheltering from the heat. Mrs. Bhushan was fanning herself with a large handkerchief. She complained of the summer, which she affirmed was definitely the hottest in the history of Pipal Nagar. She then showed Mrs. Srivastava a sample of the cloth she was going to buy, and for 5 minutes they discussed its shade, texture and design. Having exhausted this topic, Mrs. Srivastava said, do you know, my dear, that Seth Govindram's bank can't even pay its employees. Only this morning I heard a complaint from their sweeper who hasn't received his wages over a month. Remember, the sweeper did not go to Srivastava to tell about his problem. Nathu's friend Sitaram, who told Mrs. Srivastava about this problem and asked for a job for Nathu, and this is how the news is spread. The news is changed from one shape to another and spread like wildfire in the whole town. Mrs. Bhushan and Mr. Bhushan, they talk about this bank problem, and then it spreads further. Don't start grumbling, the heat is trying enough. I don't know what's happening to Pipal Nagar. Even the bank is about to go bankrupt, says Mrs. Bhushan to Mr. Bhushan. What's that? Said Kamal Kishore, who is there conversing with Mr. Bhushan, sitting up suddenly. Which bank? Why, the Pipal Nagar bank, of course. I hear they have stopped paying employees. Don't tell me you have an account there, Mr. Kishore. No, but my neighbor has, he exclaimed, and he called out over the low partition to the keeper of the barber shop next door. Dipchen, have you heard the latest? The Pipernagar bank is about to collapse. You would better get your money out as soon as you can. This is overheard by the customer in Dipchand's shop. Let's see the old gentleman now. Dipchand, who was cutting the hair of an elderly gentleman, was so startled that his hand shook and he nicked his customer's right ear. The customer yelped with pain and distress, pain because of the cut and distress because of the awful news he had just heard. We have highlighted this particular sentence because you can see how writers distinguish between words like pain and distress. Pain is physical, distress is mental. With one side of his neck still unshaven, he sped across the road to the general merchant store where there was a telephone. He dialed Seth Govind Ram's number. The Seth was not at home. Where was he then? The Seth was holidaying in Kashmir. Oh, was that so? The elderly gentleman did not believe it. He hurried back to the barber's shop and told Dipchand, the bird has flown. Seth Govindram has left town. Definitely it means a collapse. And then he dashed out of the shop, making a beeline for his office and checkbook. Now you can see how the rumor is built up by people who did not even know what exactly happened at the beginning of the story. It was the poor boy Nathu who just grumbled because he did not get his salary even though it was 20th of the month, and this is how the rumor is developed. The news spreads, and now we get the picture of the beggar. The news spread through the bazaar with the rapidity of forest fire. From the general merchants, it travelled to the shop, circulated amongst the customers, and then spread with them in various directions to the beetle seller, the tailor, the free vendor, the jeweller, the beggar sitting on the pavement. And what happens to the beggar? Let's see now. Old Ganpat, the beggar, had a crooked leg. He had been squatting on the pavement for years, calling for alms. In the evening, someone would come with a barrow to take him away. He had never been known to walk, but now, on learning that the bank was about to collapse, Ganpat astonished everyone, leaping to his feet and actually running at top speed in the direction of the bank. It soon became known that he had 1,000 rupees in savings. Imagine a beggar has more savings in a bank. That we come to understand. This is a humorous aspect of this story. Now we can see that the manager is unable to manage the customers who have all come to collect money from the bank. By noon, the small bank had gone through all its ready cash, and the harassed manager was in a dilemma. Emergency funds could only be obtained from another bank some 30 miles distant, and he wasn't sure he could persuade the crowd to wait until then. And there was no way of contacting Seth Govindram on his houseboat in Kashmir. People were turned back from the counters and told to return the following day. They did not like the sound of that, and so they gathered outside on the steps of the bank shouting, "Give us our money or we'll break in and fetch the Seth. We know he is hiding in a safe deposit locker." Mischief makers who didn't have a paisa in the bank joined the crowd and aggravated their mood. The manager stood at the door and tried to placate them. He declared that the bank had plenty of money but no immediate means of collecting it. He urged them to go home and come back the next day. What is the use of having so much of money when you are not able to give to your customers? That's the whole point of it. If the manager had given the salary to Nathu on the first day, second day, third day, or even the 10th day, this problem would not have arisen. The story ends like this. "How is that?" said Nathu. "Haven't you heard? Well, you would better wait here until half the population of Pipernagar arrives to claim their money." And he waved cheerfully. He did not have a bank account and sped away on his cycle. That is, Sitaram goes away. Nathu went back to sweeping the steps, muttering to himself. When he had finished his work, he sat down on the highest step to await the arrival of the manager. He was determined to get his pay on this day. He mutters to himself, "Who would have thought the bank would collapse?" he said to himself, and looked thoughtfully into the distance. "I wonder how it could have happened." He is the reason for it, but he doesn't know it. Unwittingly, he becomes the cause of the collapse of the bank. He is not the reason actually. The real reason is the manager who did not listen to the sweeper boy. Probably he thought, after all, a sweeper boy would have to wait for longer than what was necessary. The main character in the story is Nathu, the title character. He is a sweeper boy. He doesn't get his pay even on the 20th of the month, and he shows his frustration through the raising of the dust, which Sitaram notices and learns about, and he is ignored by the bank manager, and so he thinks that he can go for a different job, and in this case Sitaram is willing to help him to find a job. That's how Sitaram tells Mrs. Srivastava, but then the whole story takes on a different dimension. As a result, unwittingly Nathu becomes the cause of the breakdown of the bank of Paipalnagar. We have the thematic contrast here, the employee and manager. There is a relationship between the two, and they must maintain that dignity of their relationship. There is a servant and master, employee and manager, or employee and Seth Govindra. Livelihood and luxury. Some people need their money every day, whereas some other people can wait. They can spend money for luxurious things like Srivastava and Mrs. Bhushan. Truth and falsehood. The truth of the matter is Nathu doesn't get his salary, but the falsehood is that the bank doesn't have enough money. We also have help and harm. Srivastava, thinking that she would help Nathu, causes so much of disturbance for the bank. We have knowledge and ignorance. Half knowledge or incomplete knowledge can lead to disaster. Listening and speaking. We have speaking by various characters, but none listens so carefully. Particularly the manager doesn't listen so well to the sweeper boy Nathu. We have appearance and reality, friendship and hostility as well. Many such contrasts are discussed throughout the story. Remember, this is a short story written in third person narrative. There is only one event, and the whole story deals with a time scale of less than 2 days, and the location is the town Paipalnagar. We have a house, the bazaar, and also the bank. The story is in the realistic mode. We can understand various characters, they are described well. The story is also developed through some description and also dialogue, and what we have at the end of the story is some fun. That's why this story can be called a humorous story. But remember, the theme is serious. Not listening to poor people is not a joke. It can lead to some disaster, that is, it can lead to collapse of a bank. Let's see the language dimension of the story. The whole story is written in a simple English, but it has a sophisticated diction. As we mentioned the difference between pain and distress, you can understand many things through the story. We have a visual picture of the events through the right words. Look at some of the words: grumbled, banged, making a beeline, the rapidity of forest fire, the bird has flown, harassed, hurtled, smote. These are very strong words which are used throughout the story. We have conversational speech patterns when characters interact with each other. Even the poor boy speaks an elegant language. Though it is English, we may not expect a poor boy like that to speak English, but Ruskin Bond has used it. We find that the word and, the conjunction and, is used 34 times in the story. We have some questions to think about. Who would think a bank would hold up a poor man's salary? At the beginning, we have a question like this: who would think a bank would hold up a poor man's salary? At the end of the story, we have a question: who would have thought the bank would collapse? No one. Even the manager would not have thought about it, the owner of the bank would not have thought about it, the townspeople would not have thought about it. But what was not thought comes into picture because the manager doesn't give the salary to the poor boy even on the 20th of the month. Let us see some literary devices in the story. Primarily we have irony and humor in the story. A sweeper boy breaks the bank by doing nothing. He does nothing but the bank breaks. He is not paid but he gets more work. That is another aspect of the story. A half-shaven old gentleman runs across the street to make a phone call. A beggar has saved 1000 rupees in a bank. These are ironical situations. A man who was never seen walking runs at top speed. The manager proves the people's assumptions by admitting that he cannot pay them on that particular day when they demand the money from the manager. He wants them to come back the next day, but the people don't believe him. People who don't have any account in the bank throw stones and bricks and break the bank literally. And that's how Nathu has more work to do, more work of cleaning to do. Let's see the human relationships now. We have a good friendship between Nathu and Sitaram. We have a poor relationship between Nathu and his manager. That's why the whole problem arises. We have social interactions between a dhobi boy and a lady of the house, that is Mrs. Srivatsava. She has some good intention of helping Nathu, but then it turns into a serious problem. We have friendly relations between two ladies, Mrs. Srivastava and Mrs. Bhushan. We also have a strained relationship between Mr. Bhushan and Mrs. Bhushan. They have some kind of interaction with each other. When you read the story, you can understand it. We also have friendly relations between two shop owners, the photograph shop owner and the barber shop owner. We also have collegiality, friendly relations among the entire townspeople. What we understand from the story is people want to appear important in their relationship with others by giving or withholding information. Not only information, it can be money, it can be things, it can be anything. Let's see some reflections on life now. Here are a few questions for us. Why does the manager delay the payment of salary to the poor sweeper boy even after the 20th of the month? This is something that we have to think about. How do we think we can ignore poor people? Just because they are poor, do we have to ignore them? Why do people try to help each other, whatever the circumstances may be? Remember, Mrs. Srivastava wants to help Sitaram and Nathu. Why do they also cause harm in the name of help? Many times we want to help but we cause more harm. How can we live our life well by simply fulfilling our responsibilities appropriately? Just the manager has to do his job of paying salary to his staff. How does listening with understanding play a vital role in our everyday interactions? Listening is not enough. Listening with understanding is more important. How do we share relevant information to prevent gossip or rumor mongering? Rumor mongering will always be there. How do we prevent? The only way we can prevent is to give exact information, correct information. And that correct information, if you don't share, then people will assume many things and our bank or our several institutions will collapse. Let's see the takeaways now. Listen to your employees and do what is needed for them at the right time. Treat people with respect irrespective of their status. Don't give respect to people just because they belong to higher status. Don't ill-treat people if they belong to lower status. Respect people as they are. Take appearance with a pinch of salt. What appears to be true may not be true. Don't offend people by your careless attitude. Check if everybody is fine within your organization. People may be working for you, but check whether they are fine or not. Attend to people who may have some difficulties which may lead to resentment, rebellion and finally collapse of the organization. This is a good piece to understand how an organization works. Beware of people who don't have any direct business with you. They may say so many things about your company or organization and cause harm to you. Let's summarize what we have seen in the short story, The Boy Who Broke the Bank by Ruskin Bond. We have seen the objectives, we saw the life and writings of Ruskin Bond, we looked into the story The Boy Who Broke the Bank by reading some selected passages. We also looked at the list of characters, we saw the theme, form, language and literary dimensions of the story. Then we paid attention to human relationships and reflections on life by asking a series of questions. We considered certain important takeaways from the story. If you want to run an organization, listen to everybody. If you want to run your family, listen to everybody at home. And if you don't listen, there may be some serious consequences which you may have to face. If you listen well, you will live your life well. That's the whole story. I hope you enjoyed it. You will read the whole story. Some references are given for you here. Please find more details about Ruskin Bond and several of his stories. Every story will have something to cherish, something to feel happy about, something to consider for our own life, to live our life meaningfully. Thank you.